General Hospital will reveal as the bleak days quietly drifted by in Port Charles, like a thin veil slowly descending, the surface calm concealed an undercurrent of ferocious storms ready to erupt. In an atmosphere that seemed deceptively peaceful, the darkness of a new storm was silently gathering, twisting into every hidden corner of a town already too familiar with secrets, betrayals, and relentless battles. This time, all signs pointed unmistakably toward a shocking event, the unexpected return of Michael. No longer the innocent boy of the past, no longer the young man struggling to uphold justice for his family, Michael was returning as a shadow cloaked in vengeance, reshaped by wounds that had never truly healed. While the town's gossip buzzed over rumors that a new face might replace the familiar image of Michael, that a new era was about to dawn for Port Charles, a far more dangerous drama was being quietly prepared behind the scenes. There, hatreds were being woven together with cold precision, step by step, crafting the web of fate that Michael intended to use to bind and destroy his most hated enemy. Michael, once the embodiment of youthful purity tinged with impulsive rebellion, had now utterly transformed. Through the years imprisoned in physical pain and emotional torment, he had forged within himself a heart of iron, an unbreakable will, and a plan for revenge nurtured with every anguished breath. The singular target of his simmering fury was none other than Drew, a man once considered family, once a companion, now the usurper who had stolen everything Michael cherished. To the world, Drew's life appeared to flourish in success and happiness. He basked in admiration, wealth, the love of Willow, and the comfort of a perfect family with Wiley and Amelia. Yet behind this polished facade, Michael saw nothing but hollow deceit. He saw Drew as a thief, not only of love but of identity and purpose. Who had dared to reconstruct Michael's life according to his own designs, pushing him into an abyss of despair and humiliation unlike anything he had ever known. Worse than the loss of love was Drew's silent usurpation of Michael's role as a father, quietly guiding Wiley and Amelia away from the man who had once treasured them above all else. Each moment Drew held Wiley's hand, each time Amelia smiled at Drew instead of at him, it was a new blade twisting deeper into Michael's already shattered heart. It was no longer just a personal betrayal, it was a vicious attack on the sacred foundations Michael had vowed to protect, family, honor, and loyalty. As he lay fighting for his life, breath by agonizing breath, in a sterile clinic in a foreign land, Michael waged war not only against his broken body but against the gnawing torment of his soul. Each piece of news, each glimpse into Drew's thriving life back in Port Charles, struck him like a whip across open wounds. Even as his body lay helpless, Drew moved swiftly and ruthlessly, signing legal documents that stripped Michael of his last remaining rights as a father, severing ties he had believed would be unbreakable. In Michael's mind, these images fused into a monstrous storm of rage, fueled by bitterness, betrayal, and a sense of powerless fury. He knew now that he had allowed everything he loved to slip from his grasp too easily. Those endless months of enforced helplessness, watching his world be rebuilt by another's hand, had transformed him from a loving man into a hardened warrior. Now, there was only one path left, to reclaim his honor, his identity, and his family by annihilating Drew, using the cold, ruthless tactics that had once made Port Charles tremble at the sound of his name. There was no more room for forgiveness. No hesitation. Michael had etched into his mind a meticulous plan of revenge, considering every move with razor-sharp precision, ensuring that every blow would inflict maximum devastation. He would not simply attack Drew personally, he would dismantle him completely, stripping him of his reputation, his career, his relationships, and ultimately, whatever fragile pride he still clung to. Port Charles, a town that had borne witness to the rebellions and tragedies of Michael's life, would soon become the stage for a blood-soaked tragedy unlike any it had seen before. And when the storm named Michael finally broke, there would be nowhere safe for Drew to hide. For this time, Michael was no longer a boy needing protection. He had matured in darkness, had nourished his hatred until it became an inseparable part of his being, and was now prepared to take back everything he had lost, with interest repaid 100-fold. Michael's return to Port Charles would not be a warm reunion, nor would it be a tale of forgiveness wrapped in sentimentality. It would be a ruthless, meticulously calculated campaign, a total assault designed to dismantle everything Drew held dear. Armed with the hard-earned lessons carved into him by Carly and Sonny, Michael understood better than anyone that victory was never won through kindness, but through cold, strategic brutality. This time, he was not satisfied with simply defeating Drew on a personal level. He intended to utterly bury him under the crushing weight of the entire Quartermaine dynasty, weaponizing their legacy of power and influence to exact justice for all that had been stolen from him. Michael had never forgotten how Drew treated Jason, the one man who had been more than just a brother, but a father figure, a protector, and a beacon in the darkest times of his life. Jason had risked everything, even his own life, to save Drew without hesitation. Yet what Drew offered in return was not gratitude but contempt, an icy betrayal that struck at the very core of loyalty and honor that Jason embodied. For Michael, this was a sin that could not, and would not, be forgiven. This festering resentment had become the fuel for the intricate and merciless plans now dominating his mind, pushing him into a battlefield mindset where compassion had no place and where only retribution mattered. Meanwhile, Drew, in his arrogance and complacency, seemed to have forgotten a crucial truth. Beneath Michael's calm and affable exterior lurked a wolf, one raised in the ruthless teachings of Sonny and Carly, two of the most cunning and dangerous players Port Charles had ever known. Drew, blinded by his temporary triumphs, failed to remember that Michael had already demonstrated his lethal capabilities. It was Michael who once mercilessly wrested custody of Avery away from Sonny when he felt betrayed. It was Michael who, without hesitation, killed Claudia in a desperate bid to protect Carly, showcasing a deadly resolve hidden behind youthful eyes. It was Michael who cornered and humiliated Nina in an unforgiving power struggle, showing no mercy to those who crossed him. These were not isolated acts, they were glimpses into the depths of savagery Michael could reach when pushed too far. Now, with the pain of betrayal etched into every fiber of his being, Michael was no longer the reluctant fighter he once had been. He was a force honed through years of battle, grief, and loss, a weapon finally unsheathed. Drew, who had foolishly underestimated the quiet fury growing inside Michael, was about to face a version of him forged in blood and heartbreak, a version that would stop at nothing to reclaim everything ripped from him. At the same time, far away in Germany, another battle was quietly unfolding within the sterile, indifferent walls of the clinic where Michael was hidden away from the world. Willow, trapped in a web of manipulation she hadn't yet fully recognized, fought her own losing war. Denied access to her husband, she found herself spiraling into despair, confronting the crushing realization that the very people she had trusted most were subtly orchestrating her isolation. She didn't know the full extent of the betrayal yet, didn't realize that behind closed doors, Carly had moved stealthily, pulling every string necessary to ensure that Willow remained separated from Michael. Under the guise of protection, Carly had weaponized control, creating barriers so thick and invisible that Willow's love and loyalty had been rendered useless. Every door that slammed shut, every obstacle she faced, was a reminder that her agency had been stolen under the pretense of concern. Carly's true motive was not the preservation of Michael's well-being, but the preservation of Corinthos' power, ensuring that all aspects of their fractured empire, including Michael himself, remained firmly under her command. As Willow sat in lonely waiting rooms and stared at silent hallways that led nowhere, she unknowingly waged a losing war against an enemy she could not even see. Every moment apart from Michael, every failed attempt to reach him, played perfectly into the grander design that Carly had so expertly orchestrated. And thus, across oceans and continents, the stage was being set for a reckoning of monumental proportions. Port Charles would soon tremble not from a petty feud or a passing scandal, but from the earthquake that would be Michael's long-awaited retribution, an unstoppable force, born not just of anger but of the profound betrayal of love, family, and trust. Drew's time was running out. Willow's hope was fading. And the storm that had been quietly building for so long was finally ready to break. In Port Charles, whispers of Michael's looming return spread like wildfire, a feverish undercurrent electrifying the air. It started as cautious murmurs in shadowy corners of the hospital, escalated into breathless gossip at coffee shops and private gatherings, until it became an unstoppable tide of speculation and fear. Some dared to hope that Michael would return as a hero, a beacon of redemption for a town that so desperately needed it. They pictured a Michael restored by adversity, standing tall with honor, ready to reclaim his place among the living. But others, those who understood the depths of betrayal he had suffered, shivered at the thought of a different Michael, one who had been fundamentally transformed by pain and fury into something much darker. In their imaginations, he was no longer the boy they remembered but a cold, calculating ghost cloaked in vengeance, carrying within him a firestorm of retribution that nothing could extinguish. Amid this simmering atmosphere, Drew remained dangerously oblivious to the gathering storm. Drunk on the wine of his recent power plays and the illusion of invincibility, he basked in the self-congratulatory glow of his victories. In his mind, he was ascending without rival, securing alliances with influential figures like Laura, carving out a kingdom where no one could challenge him. He flaunted his newfound strength with reckless abandon, challenging the Quartermaines themselves, dismissing the old rules that once kept the balance in Port Charles. He dreamed of a future where his position was unassailable, a future built on the ashes of the very people he once claimed to love. But Drew, in his arrogance, failed to sense the cold breath of death creeping closer. He did not see that Michael, the one he had betrayed and discarded, was preparing to rise like a vengeful spirit, sharpened by agony, stripped of mercy. Drew, so focused on expanding his empire, never realized that the clock was already ticking against him, that every second brought him closer to a reckoning he could neither predict nor survive. Michael had no intention of giving Drew even a sliver of time to solidify his dreams. His return would not be heralded by banners or welcomed by parades, it would be the onset of a nightmare so profound that Drew would feel its tremors long before the final blow fell. Michael would not simply attack Drew's person. No, his strategy was far more intricate, far more devastating. He would constrict Drew from every possible direction, professionally, socially, personally, until there was no avenue left for escape. First, he would dismantle Drew's career, exposing the hidden corruption, the clandestine deals, the web of deceit Drew had spun to build his empire. Michael would ensure that Drew's name became toxic, that every ally he had cultivated would turn on him in disgust or fear. Simultaneously, he would tear apart Drew's most intimate relationships, using truth as a blade sharper than any lie. Every secret, every betrayal Drew thought he had buried, Michael would unearth and parade before the world, stripping Drew of dignity, leaving him naked before a town that once admired him. Michael would be methodical, patient, and absolutely relentless. He would push Drew into a corner so dark and suffocating that the only thing left would be bitterness and hatred, not just from others, but from within Drew himself. He would make sure that Drew understood, with agonizing clarity, that this downfall was not a misfortune or a random twist of fate, but a punishment. A deliberate, inevitable consequence of his own treachery. In Michael's heart, this was no longer about lost love, wounded pride, or even personal revenge. This was a holy crusade, a non-negotiable judgment against a man who had betrayed family, desecrated friendship, and spat on the sacred bonds that once tied Port Charles together. Every step Michael would take was not born from impulse, but from the calculated rage of someone who had loved too deeply, been betrayed too thoroughly, and suffered too long. Gone was the boy who once hesitated, once questioned whether revenge was worth the price. In his place stood a figure of cold resolve, molded by endless nights of pain and days of helplessness. Michael had stared into the abyss, and unlike Drew, he had not flinched. He had embraced the darkness, shaped it, and now wielded it as a weapon. He was ready to be the executioner Port Charles had never seen before. A brutal, merciless force who would not simply defeat his enemy but obliterate him entirely, leaving behind nothing but a cautionary tale etched into the town's memory for generations. And in this story, Michael would not be the tragic hero or the misunderstood victim. He would be the storm that swallowed everything. And Drew, foolish, arrogant Drew, would be the first, but certainly not the last, to be swept away. The day Michael returned to Port Charles would not be one of celebration, but a day of reckoning. His arrival would signal the beginning of a relentless storm, a force born from betrayal and forged in suffering. Drew, blind in his pride, would soon face the harsh truth, Everything he had stolen would be stripped away, not through money or influence, but through total, soul-crushing destruction. Michael's vengeance would be cold, precise, and unstoppable, dismantling Drew's life piece by piece until nothing remained. As the storm bearing Michael's name swept through Port Charles, it would leave behind a shattered town and a legacy of ruthless justice that no one would ever forget.